What up, what up? It's Garage Gym Homie, and today I'm going over being Jewish in jail and prison. Is it worth it? Before we get into this here, please click the subscribe button. I got content coming out all the dang time for you, man. So click subscribe and let's get into this, man. God bless all of you homies. I hope you're feeling amazing. Living from the heart, staying out of your head. I just wanted to share with you a personal experience because we live in a world where now, this thing going on in the Middle East, it's all this stuff you see on the media, anti-Semitism, anti this genocide. I'm staying out of all that, but I just thought it would be a good opportunity to share my personal experience, man. So you know a little bit about where I come from, what's molded me. This YouTube channel is kind of like my version of writing a book. I just thought I'd give you guys some insight. So just to start it off, man, being a Jewish person, we kind of, a lot of us, I'm talking about myself, but I think a lot of us, we grow up being told that the whole world hates us. Everybody hates Jews. That's what, when you grow up in a household, a Jewish household, that's like drilled into your head. The Holocaust, has the it invokes an emotional response for most Jewish people, I feel like, and because it's drilled in our head so much as a kid. I'm not saying it is true or it isn't true that the whole world hates us. I don't know. I'm just saying as a child, from right when you're a kid, you're grown up being told that, And now as an adult, one thing that I hate more than anything, well, not more than anything, but one thing that I can't stand, man, is victim mentality. I don't like when my people do it. I don't like when other groups of people do it. So I'm very cautious not to have this attitude that everyone hates me because I'm a Jew. I've never been into that, man. That's just me, though. I don't like living like a victim, especially since sobriety, man. I find that we have to take responsibility and look at where our people are wrong. And I have, I think most people in the world, Jewish or not, are decent, good people, man. I think most people, in my experience, are decent, loving, just trying to get by and doing their own thing. And I think there's bad apples in every group, and especially my own people, man. I think we got to call them out. Who do you think's at the top of a lot of pharmaceutical companies giving poison to people? Who do you think's at the top of, Hollywood feeding toxic trash, and the music industry poisoning children? It's a lot of it's my people, man, and I think we should be able to talk about that. There's a very disproportionate amount of Jewish people doing some very horrible things, man. And I think it's okay to acknowledge that if I want to hold my people accountable. So anyway, let's talk about my personal experience, man. I started going to jail when I was 18 here in Michigan, Oakland County Jail. And it was never a lot of anti-Semitism or anything like that I dealt with. I think most of my experience through boarding schools or rehabs or jails or living in community settings have been more people just talking junk, making fun. It hasn't been, it didn't feel super mean-spirited ever, And so I didn't have too much of an experience with any kind of hatred or anything, here in Michigan, going to jail. When I went to Los Angeles County, you go into jail there when I was, 21 or 22, I moved out to LA, and that's why I started going to jail out there 10 days after I got there. And there it's very racially segregated. So there's whole different breed of people out there, man, whole different breed of people. And, people would say, well, what are you? Are you Hispanic? Are you white? Or this? Obviously, I'm white. And so I'd roll with the whites. Now, there are a lot of skinheads out there, man. A lot of skinheads out there. And it was even in LA County Jail, I was pretty cool with everybody, man. Like I was pretty. I didn't have a ton of problems. When I got there and I didn't know the rules and the politics, I got boo-bopped, I got beat up. I had to fight back. I ran my mouth. I talked about saying how some of these politics were stupid and stuff, and the racially segregated. Because I come from jail where it's inmates versus the cops, not a bunch of in LA County in California. It's inmates versus inmates. The cops have you distracted because you're so worried about what other races are doing. It's inmates versus inmates. So they got a great system, man. It's just kind of like our real world on a smaller scale. How the higher ups have us distracted with dividing us up between each other, so we're not focused on what they're doing, man. It's no different, a mini version in prison. It's kind of interesting, actually. So, like I came across skinheads, man, and they're skinheads. They have swastikas all over. They had lightning bolts. They had whatever the number was. It's been a while. I don't even remember. They had all that HH, all that stuff, man, and there was a lot of them, but they were kind of in the mix. And there were some cops who were skinheads too, apparently, who would be cool with them and whatever. Are they real skinheads or whatever? I don't know, man. Like, I've been schooled on what real skinheads are from like OG back in the day. I don't think a real skinhead would mark up their freaking white skin with black ink. I mean, that's kind of old school. I mean, these are kind of these new age skinheads, with tattoos all over them and stuff, not the ones from like way back in the day. And, they'd smoke freaking tobacco that came out of a black man's butthole. And I'm not trying to be funny, man. I'm just telling you how it is. These skinheads, a lot of them, they claim to be so righteous. They'd do heroin that came out of a Hispanic dude or a black dude, rear end or whatever. I'm just telling you how it is, man. The realities of jails and prisons, and so I'm being real. So, like in LA County Jail, I messed with it a little. I don't know if the word proud, I guess I've been proud of who I am. I took pride in it. As a little kid, I didn't think being Jewish was cool, but I didn't think religion was cool. I thought it was like not cool to be Jewish, not cool to be, religious. That's lame, la la la. But as an adult, like going into jail, I never shied away from telling people that I was Jewish. And when I got schooled on when I finally got sentenced to state prison in California, there were people who told me things like, hey man, you probably shouldn't tell people you're Jewish. You don't want problems. You probably, maybe, you should tell people you're Armenian. Because people would ask me like, hey, are you Armenian? They'd think I looked Armenian or whatever. And I'd be like, no, I'm Jewish. Just to clear it up. I don't want to claim to be Armenian. Then they ask, what gang I'm at on the streets, Glendale, whatever the heck it was. And so I'm not going to get in trouble by saying something I'm not. That'll catch up with you in prison every time. So anyway, man, I've always kind of stood tall, and I've always been, even then, man, when I was getting high, too true to myself to ever not say that I was Jewish. I always felt deep down in my heart I'm a Jewish person, and people are either just going to deal with it or whatever, but I'm never going to lie to anybody and say I'm not Jewish. So when I got to prison, I first went to North Kern State Prison, which is also called Delano in California. And man, I freaking there was a rabbi there, really freaking nice guy, man. I was in a dorm with probably 250 people in there, and that's reception. So that's where you go when they're classifying your security level and they're figuring out where you're going for your main yard, which is where you pretty much end up. So I spent about 6 weeks there. And a couple of days after I got there, I mean, my memory's fuzzy. You go through medical and all this stuff. And, hey! And you go through medical and all this stuff, man. And I remember they called my name. And this, in front of the whole dorm, man, hundreds of people, they call my full name. And at the front of the dorm, there's this freaking little Jewish guy, man, like a rabbi looking guy. He's got a yarmulke on and everything. And they call me out. So it was like they kind of put me on blast in front of the whole dang dorm, that I was Jewish. It's like the Jewish chaplain. The prisons have a chaplain, whether it's a Christian or whatever. The Jewish chaplain saw my name, that I was an inmate there, knew I was Jewish based on my name, my first and last name. I have Hebrew and Jewish name, very common Jewish name. And he calls me up. So in front of the whole dang dorm, this guy starts calling me out. And every few days, maybe once a week, or I forget, man, it had to be like once a week, they would call me out in front of the whole dang dorm, and the chaplain would take me in his office. Nice guy, man. He would freaking, I wasn't doing anything wrong. He would call my family for me, not in front of me, but he'd be like, what's their number? I'll call them, tell them that I saw you. I think he gave me like a little food to eat when I was in his office, whatever. Super nice guy, went above and beyond to, comfort me. And I was terrified, man. I was going off to prison for the first time, and it kind of felt like home. Not being in prison didn't, but being around somebody who's, was Jewish in this place with all these inmates and, convicts who, I was one of them, but I never felt comfortable like I was really, one of them, if that makes sense. Like, these were people who have committed, a lot of them, man, I can't speak for all of them, committed, like most of their lives that they were going to be in and out of prison. And me, like, I always knew that I had something better for me, man. Like, I was just untreated. I always knew deep down. So, people, I'd come back to the dorm and be like, who is that? That's the rabbi? Oh, you're Jewish, da-da-da. And honestly, man, like, nobody was even, from what I recall, man, this was back in 2022, or no, I'm sorry, 2009. From what I recall, this was in 2009. This was in 2009. From what I was 22, not 2022. I was 22 in 2009. Excuse me. I don't even recall anybody really being hateful at reception in prison, man. Now, when I got shipped to my main yard, and as I said, there's been stuff here and there, people would say kike or this or that, far and few in between, and I'd have to get into it, whatever. Now, when I got to my main yard in prison, that's when it was freaking insane, man. I've dealt with real, I'm not going to pretend, there's real racism in the world. That doesn't mean that it's as blown up as the media wants us to think. There's real anti-Semitism in the world. That also doesn't mean it's as blown up. But it was as real as it gets, man. It was freaking crazy, homie. So I'm just going to tell you that when I got to my prison yard, word got out. First of all, I walked in to prison. I walked in a dorm. I was in a dorm with probably 100 people, man. When I first got to reception, I was in a cell by myself for weeks, and then they moved me into the big dorm that I was telling you about with like 250 people. When I first got to prison over in Bakersfield, California, I walked into a dorm, man, with, 80 or 100 people, which is where I spent the entirety of my time at, in this same dorm. And right when I get to my, I had my commissary from being in the last prison. I brought it with me, had a ton of ramen noodles, all this. So I started putting away in my locker room, man. And a white boy walked up to me. His name was Cowboy. And he was a skinhead, even though he didn't look like it. He had long, slick back hair, not too long, nice head of hair, man. I remember slicked back. You know, a lot of those skinheads, they're undercover skinheads. They don't always just have actual skinheads, but that's who they run with and stuff. So he walked up to me, man, when I'm putting all my stuff in my locker, and he's like, "Hey, man, can I get a soup?" And I just had this feeling, man, like I hadn't even been in the dorm for 5 minutes and I'm putting my stuff away. I had a feeling like this dude was testing me, man. Like that's the feeling I got. Like this dude, Cowboy, I didn't know his name was even Cowboy. Or he shook my hand. He said, "My name's Cowboy." I remember. I did know his name was Cowboy. He introduced himself. He's like, "Hey, man, can I get a soup or a couple of those soups?" And I'm thinking, dude, I haven't even been in the dorm for freaking like 3 minutes, dude. And this guy's asking me for something. I feel like he's testing me. You know, like he wants to see if I'm just willing to give him whatever I got. So I said, "No, man, I'm putting it away right now, maybe later." You know, I brushed him off. I wasn't just going to be in the dorm for 3 minutes. And this guy walks up to me looking in my locker. "Can I have something?" So I was like, I'm just not going to do it. It wasn't a big deal, man, but I said no. Now, this guy found out I was Jewish later, man, and it was freaking absolutely like the word spread like wildfire. I think somebody asked me in the dorm, like, maybe they even asked, "Are you Armenian or something?" And I was like, "No, I'm Jewish." Dude, that whole freaking prison, man, it wasn't a huge prison. Word got out, man. My like first day there, it was freaking hell, homie. Like hell. Like I had people mad dogging me. I had people talking junk right away. I had to get in multiple fights like when I got there because of disrespect. And I hate fighting, homie. I am not a tough dude. I am not a fighter. I am not a freaking, I'm not tough at all. I hate I'm terrified of it. I'm scared. I'm in prison. I could pretend that I wasn't scared or I'm too hard for the yard or anything. I was terrified in prison, homie. Terrified. Just like the rest of my life, I was terrified, man, up to getting sober. And, you know, so like these guys, there were a lot of freaking Nazi skinhead dudes at this prison, man. And they rolled together. It was like nothing I've been to in LA County Jail or the prison before at Delano. Now, these dudes, man, were complete a-holes, man. You know, when I'm in prison, I'm supposed to be with the white boys, and the white boys are supposed to have my back, and there's supposed to be a camaraderie between us, man. These dudes, the skinheads, we're supposed to be doing spreads together. We're supposed to be eating together. It's supposed to be joy. They straight up said, "I'm not going to eat with that guy." You know, they wouldn't eat with me. They wouldn't be around me. They wouldn't do any of the camaraderie. But I knew if I got in a freaking fight with a black or a Mexican, they would have had to have my back no matter what. You know, I knew that, but they weren't going to pretend that we were friends. The whole time, man, pointing their swastikas at me, man. Well, that's not true, man, actually. The whole time, that's not true. That wore off after several months of me not being worn down. They wanted me to roll my stuff up, man, go to the freaking front of the dorm and press the button and tell the cops that I wanted to be out of there, you know, or go to a different dorm or be in a protective custody situation. And I wasn't going to do it, man. I wasn't going to bend for them because, not that I'm tough, not that I'm hard, but because I knew the consequences if I did that, man. I knew that if I bent for these people and I went to the freaking front of the dorm and rolled my stuff up, that those freaking cops, man, were going to put me in some PC situation and people were going to think of me as a snitch or a freaking child molester or some freaking weirdo sex charge or something like that, man. And I wasn't going to make myself a target, man. I would have rather put up with the Jewish hatred and all the nonsense and live terrified. I remember, man, waking up in prison thinking to myself, I finally understand in the deepest place in my heart what the term "sleep with one eye open" means. I was always on guard in prison, man. Always ready to jump, man. Because I didn't think I swear to you, from the deepest place in my heart, there were times where I did not think that I was going to make it out of there alive. I used to walk the yard And these dudes would congregate. There's no weights in prison in California anymore. That was long before my time. These dudes would congregate, man, these skinheads at the dip and pull-up bar. Was right in the middle of the yard. There was a yard, big track, and right in the middle was the dip bars, pull-up bars. They had a couple of them for the different races. I think the blacks had their own, and the whites and Hispanics shared one. And the freaking white supremacy skinhead dudes would freaking congregate there and mad dog me, man. As I freaking walked the yard, I'd walk the yard, they would mad dog me. And I remember thinking, man, I'm in freaking prison, man. I didn't look like I do now. I was like 128 pounds, man, sucked up, you know, from whatever. Maybe I was a little healthier because I'd been in county already in the other prison. But, you know, I remember thinking, man, I should be spending my time here getting freaking ripped, man. But I could not go to those pull-up bars unless I wanted trouble. You know, so there was actually a skinhead named Trouble who was kind of like the head of the whole thing there. And he had the keys to the yard. He was one of the head dudes, you know, that ran the yard there. And when he left, man, it was like a little bit of relief. And I remember, man, walking the freaking yard. And this dude came up to me, this dude named Rob. Heavy dude, and I made videos about Rob, man. And he walked up to me at the yard. We were already a little friendly. This guy, Rob, had swastikas tattooed on him, freaking bolts, all the stuff that white boys have. And he said to me, hey, man, I want to tell you something. I'm Jewish too, man, but do not tell anybody that. This guy had a swastika tattooed on him, man. And I remember telling him right then on the spot, I was like, dude, that's freaking soft as heck, dude. I was like, why are you hiding who you are? He's like, I just do not want the problems. He goes, I do not tell anybody that in here, man. He's done multiple prison terms, and we ended up freaking rolling on the streets and being like roll dogs, dude, after prison for quite a long time, man. But I remember he came up to me, man, and confided in me. This big freaking prison dude who had swastikas on him told me he was Jewish too, man. And I stood tall, man, that whole entire time and just dealt with it. All that swastika pointing, all that Hail Hitler, all that nonsense they did, man. I made it through, man. And that was God who took me through that situation, man. Because I could have been stabbed. When you're in prison, anything could happen. And when you're dealing with youngsters, man, who are trying to make a name for themselves, or it's their first time in prison, or this or that, they're trying to put in work, they'll do anything, homie. They'll do anything. So I'm super blessed. I didn't make it through because I'm so tough or I'm so hard or this or that. I made it through because God, man. God carried me through and took me through that situation, man. Just like he did the racial riots, my addiction, everything, man. And so that was a crazy time, dude. So anti-Semitism, that's a real thing I've dealt with. A lot of these Jewish kids I grew up with, they might be posting on Instagram about anti-Semitism or talking. I dealt with these people, man. I've dealt with it, you know, and my addiction took me to actually dealing with the real deal, man, in my face. Swastikas, Hitler tattoos, this, that, freaking Hail Hitlers, all this signage, man, fighting because of being Jewish, tormented, taunted. I'm not a victim, man. I put myself in that position. Those were problems of my making because of my addiction, because I didn't treat it. I put myself there, man. So I'm still not a victim, but I definitely dealt with, you know, people who hated me just because of who the heck I was, man. Just because I'm Jewish, man. That is real, and I have dealt with it. Now, does that make me think that the whole entire world hates Jews? No, man, I don't have any experience to go on to say that, man. I think that there are probably hateful people in the world. But as I said, man, as a sober dude who goes through the world, and I don't deal with a lot of people today, man. I keep my circle tight. Most people are very kind and loving, man. So does that mean anti-Semitism's not real? No, it's real, but I think I have to have a balanced perspective, man. So I just wanted to share with you, man, where I came from, and to give you a little bit about prison was traumatic, man. Prison was a very scary, traumatic place, and God carried me through, man. So I am super blessed. So that's how it is there, man. That's what I got. And, you know, there's a lot of crazy stories about people. You know, a lot of crazy stories I have from prison. But as far as me being Jewish, that's what I dealt with, man. God bless all of you to get. So is it worth it? I'd say going to prison as a Jewish person is worth it because it's turned me into the person that I am today. God bless all of you, man. Hit the like button. I'm out.